Imagine, you are a soldier in World War II. The war ends, but you don't know that the war is over for 30 years, and you continue to fight. Hiroo Onoda has such an interesting story. Before we move on to our video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to support us. You can contribute by liking our videos and leaving your comments. Thanks to your support, we can continue to tell stories as Shadow Historian. Thank you all. Onoda was working in various jobs and living an ordinary life until 1944. On December 26, 1944, he was sent to Lubang Island in the Philippines to help his country in World War II. Onoda took part in a commando class called Futamata at the Nakano School of Japanese Military Intelligence, specializing in guerrilla tactics and survival. Hiroo's orders from his commander were short and clear. He will do everything he can to stop enemy activity on the island. He will not be captured. He will take his own life, if necessary. When Hiroo arrived on the island, he fought alongside the soldiers who had been sent there earlier. But day by day, their numbers dwindled. Many of them died or were captured. When the truth hit Onoda, there were only 4 of them left. It was very difficult for them to fight actively because they had to move every 4-5 days. They had to hunt for food. Onoda saw this and took his men up into the mountains. There was a lot of rainfall in the area, so no one was visiting the mountains, which would allow them to set up a long-term camp. A lot of time had passed, and the 4 men were still struggling to survive. By this time, the war had been over for 4 years, and peace had been restored. Since communication was limited in those years, the Japanese and the Americans, anticipating that there would be unreachable people in the Pacific, had leaflets posted in many places, such as the island where Onoda was located, stating that the war was over. Onoda saw the leaflets, but did not believe them, thinking that they were a trick of the United States. As the years passed with difficulty, the team was reduced from 4 to 3 when Akatsu surrendered. Onoda and his friends saw Akatsu surrender and concluded that Akatsu had made a deal with the enemy because of the enemy's warm welcome. After the surrender, Akatsu learned that the war had actually ended years before. And when he told the authorities about Onoda and the rest of the survivors, the authorities mobilized to resolve the situation. Despite all the attempts, Onoda and his friends continued to disbelieve them. An airplane circling the island even dropped letters and photographs from friends of the remaining soldiers on the island. But Onoda thought it was a cleverly planned trick of the enemy. In 1954, Shimada was shot and killed. 7 days later, loudspeakers placed around the island began broadcasting for the 2 remaining men, Onoda and Kazuka. Onoda, Kazuka, the war is over. Onoda clearly thought it was an American hoax because their friend Shimada had been shot dead by the local police. But despite this, Onoda and Kazuka continued to think that one day the Japanese would return to the island and take control from the Americans. Meanwhile, years pass and Onoda and Kazuka are still at large. They continue their guerrilla warfare with small activities like burning rice paddies. The Filipinos and the Japanese tried to tell Onoda and Kazuka that the war is over, but nothing they do can convince Onoda that the war is over. Once Onoda's own brother came from Japan and spoke through loudspeakers, telling Onoda to give up. Onoda could not make out his brother's face from the distance and thought that this was a trick, that the Americans had outsmarted them. Onoda was convinced that they had brought another Japanese man who sounded exactly like his brother and forced him to speak. In Onoda's mind, Japan would never surrender until the last man was dead. And since there was still one Japanese alive, the war continued. In 1965, Onoda and Kazuka stole a radio to listen to reports from Peking. Strangely enough, the two were still stuck in 1945 in their minds and still thought they would hear military talk on the radio. When they turned it on, they heard things like horse races, but they still thought it was all still a game. Years passed, and Kazuka and Onoda's war continued. One day they decided to burn the rice piles in the area, and the date was October 1972. It had been 27 years since the war had ended, and the whole order had changed. Their action was a big mistake because the police patrol was nearby. While they were doing it, the police shot Kazuka twice, and he died. In 1974, Onoda was still living alone on the island and was ready to die here. He was running low on ammunition, and starvation had become part of his life. He used gunpowder to make a fire, made clothes and shelter from old tires and pieces of bamboo. He patched his rotting clothes with bamboo patches. That same year, he met Suzuki, a young student living alone in a tent in the forest. Suzuki was a young college student who had left Japan and was on his way to travel the world. The two became friends, and Suzuki told Onoda everything. Onoda still didn't believe him and said the only way he could believe him was if Major Taniguchi, who had assigned him to this mission, came and gave him orders. Suzuki left and promised to find Major Yoshimi Taniguchi. He did. On March 9th, 1974, Onoda, his clothes in tatters, saluted as soon as he recognized Taniguchi. "Lieutenant Onoda, ready for duty, sir." He handed over his Aresaka 99 rifle and only 500 rounds of ammunition and a few grenades. Thus, on March 10th, 1974, at 3 p.m., on the order of Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, Lieutenant Onoda's Second World War came to an end. Onoda, who joined the war at the age of 23, was 52 when he surrendered. Suzuki and Onoda remained friends for many years. Onoda wrote an autobiography, No Surrender, My 30-Year War, after recovering his health. He later married and moved to Brazil. One day, after reading on the news that a Japanese teenager had been murdered by his parents, he returned home and founded a school called the Onoda Nature School to teach young people about nature. In 2014, he died at the age of 92 as a result of a heart attack.